I'm Paul Foster from Salt in Stratford-Upon-Avon. We're a 1 Michelin star restaurant and cookery school. I've spent my career working with some of the best chefs in the world, Sat Baines, Thomas Keller and Raymond Blanch. And I've developed a food style which is all about purity of flavour and using the best ingredients that aren't manipulated. So I've translated that into a menu for Banquist. So we're starting with cured scallops with a beautiful sweet and sour dill dressing and just some nicely cooked samphire. Main course is a roasted rack of lamb using some Indian influences that I really love. Caramelised curried cauliflower puree, Bombay style potatoes. It's just finished off with some sprouting broccoli. And then to end, perfect, indulgent, decadent dessert. Chocolate Marquise, vanilla clotted cream, and for some texture, a really nice chocolate soil. Then we've paired this menu with a beautiful moulin de chèvre. So here's what's in your box today. Got some beautiful hand-dyed scallops from Orkney, with some finger limes from the Philippines. We're going to use the segments from them. Lemons are to cure the scallops. On your herb tray we've got some dill for a dressing, some thyme which is going to be used later on with the lamb, fresh coriander, some samphire which is going to be served with the scallop, and some lemongrass as well which is for the cauliflower puree. So with the main course we've got a rack of lamb which is going to be roasted, really nice and crispy fat, caramelised cauliflower puree using the cauliflower, some ginger, some garlic and a little bit of the curry powder. With that we're serving some Bombay potatoes, so we're using Maris Piper potatoes with the mustard seed, some curry powder and some tomato puree. And then for dessert, chocolate Marquise, which is like a slightly firmer mousse with chocolate soil that's enhanced with some malt and some almonds, and then a vanilla clotted cream. And I've paired this with a moulin de chèvre. So now you've seen the ingredients, you've just got to bring a few basic store products to the mix. We've got some vegetable oil, olive oil, a little bit of castor sugar, some sea salt and pepper, and then some butter as well. I always use salted butter, but you can use unsalted butter, it's totally up to you. And then some basic equipment we're going to need. Some chopping boards, a nice range of different chopping boards to separate, a blender, which we're going to use twice, some spoons and some water for tasting, a knife, a microplane and a peeler, a few oven trays, and then a good heavy base pan to cook your lamb in, and then some nice saucepans as well. So let's get on with the prep. So the most important thing to remember when cooking any piece of meat like this, especially if you want it pink, is to remove it from the fridge early to come up to temperature. So meat like this, I'd bring out for about half an hour earlier, let it come up to temperature, and then it's going to cook beautifully. So first job to get on is cauliflower puree, because it's going to take a bit of time to caramelise, to really develop those flavours. You will get a whole cauliflower in your box, but one this size, you're only going to need about half. So remove all the outer leaves, and then just very carefully remove the stalk. So my philosophy on food is about using the best ingredients and cooking them simply. As chefs, we're nothing without our suppliers and our producers. So if I have great produce come through the door, it's going to make my life a lot easier and give my customers the best food possible. We don't over manipulate food, we extract the flavour, make it taste the best we possibly can, which is what you'll see with some of these recipes today. So I'm going to cut the cauliflower in half. Just keep that one to one side. And then just shred it. So cutting it like this, it gives you more surface area, which is going to give you more colour, which in turn is going to give more flavour. And then also it's going to help it cook a little bit quicker and a bit more evenly as well. All into a tray. Then a couple of stalks of lemongrass. Just going to bruise these and bend them. It's going to help bring the flavour out as we start to cook it. You can smell the aroma already. Then a piece of ginger. Peel the skin off. They're going to microplane that straight over the cauliflower, because they're going to go into the pan at the same time. And if you do it into the cauliflower and not into a tub, you're going to catch all those juices. So we're not wasting any flavour here. Make sure you get everything that collects off the underside. Use your knife to scrape it. If you don't have a microplane, the fine side of a box grater works totally fine. Just got to take a bit more time to get it out of the grooves. So now everything's ready to go. My pan's hot. I'm going to add the butter and start to colour the cauliflower. So the pan's already warming up. Make sure it's a moderate heat. We want to add a few knobs of butter and just get it foaming. This is what you're looking for. If it's too hot, the butter will burn. If it's too low, it'll just melt. Once that's melted and all started to foam, then I'm going to add the cauliflower and ginger. So the butter's all melted now. There's no colour on it, which is just what we want. Time to add the cauliflower. The really important thing with this, where a lot of people go wrong at home, the pan selection. So you want to make sure you've got a pan with plenty of surface area. If the cauliflower is too piled up, it's just going to steam and it's not going to colour. You see how that's nice and flat? It's going to cook more evenly and it's going to cook quicker as well. So we're going to add some sea salt now. You can use table salt if you want. What that's going to do, that's going to draw some moisture out, so it's going to help it to caramelise. So it's not boiling. We're going to get rid of as much moisture as possible at the start, caramelise it, end up with a beautiful puree. So Indian food is one of my favourite foods to eat. I use a lot of influences, especially with lamb. And curried cauliflower in many different ways is lovely, but pairing the lamb with like this curry, the caramelisation, ginger, you just get a lovely, lovely balance of ingredients. So that's the sound you want to hear. Just frying gently. It's not too harsh, but it's not steaming away. You're developing colour. You're not trying to hard fry it. So this is going to take about 15 to 20 minutes to really get the colour we want for this. So you can leave it on a moderate fry and then crack on with some other components. So our cauliflower's caramelising away, we can get on with preparing the potatoes. So we've got two large Maris Piper potatoes. Just peel them. Maris Piper is a great versatile potato. It's good for crisping, mashed potatoes, roast potatoes, chips. It's the best all-rounder. So just make sure all the skin is off, and we're going to remove any eyes that are in there as well. I'll just peel them down a little further. So above my restaurant I run masterclasses, cookery masterclasses online, and the most common mistake is organisation. I always tell guests that the cooking is easy, it's the organisation and the timing that's key. So that's what you've really got to think about when cooking a dinner like this. So potatoes are peeled. We're going to cut them into even sized cubes. I'd say about 1 centimetre. They don't have to be perfectly square, so we don't want to waste any potato. So one like this I'll cut to 3, and then into roughly even sized cubes. So whilst you're doing this, don't forget about anything else that's cooking. You know, the potatoes are okay waiting there for a minute while you stir anything or check anything that's on the stove, especially while we're cooking that cauliflower puree still. So the potatoes are ready. We're going to dress them and season them in all these different spices. So you can do this in a mixing bowl or straight onto the tray. Potatoes on. A couple of tablespoons of the oil. This is vegetable oil. You can use sunflower oil as well. Any clean oil like that that's not going to burn. I wouldn't use olive oil or anything like that for this. A sprinkle of the curry powder, just enough to just coat the potatoes. Some of the mustard seed, a couple of teaspoons. And then sea salt. After that, a little bit, about teaspoon and a half tomato puree. This is one of those recipes that I'm giving you a base here, that it's something that you could, do in the future. You can adapt the spices if you wish, change the oil if you like, or use ghee, which is traditionally used in Indian cookery. But once you know this base, then it's up to you where you take it. So now they're nice and evenly coated. Again, like I was saying with the cauliflower puree, spread them out, nice, plenty of surface area. They're going to cook evenly, they're going to caramelise, and they're going to get a lovely crispness to them. So we're going to set these aside to cook later, but all they're going to take is 20 to 25 minutes at 170 degrees. That's a preheated oven, turned a couple of times during to make sure they're cooked nice and evenly. So you can see we're starting to get a little bit of colour on the cauliflower now, and then on the bottom of the pan, all these lovely caramelised bits. Don't worry about that, don't be scared, it's not burning. Just use a spoon or a spatula just to scrape those bits up. All that caramelisation at the bottom of the pan is flavour. If you leave it there and don't stir it, it will eventually burn, but don't be scared of it. So cauliflower's cooked down now. It's probably lost about a quarter of its yield, because we're evaporating some of the moisture away. So sometimes at the restaurant we take this to a really deep, dark golden colour. We're just doing a light caramelisation on this today. So if you want to take it further, that's up to you. I'd say another 5 to 10 minutes and this is going to be perfect to finish. So now I'm going to add the lemongrass. I add this now because I don't want it to colour too much. I want to get that lovely lemony aroma from it, and leave this another 5 to 10 minutes to cook and it'll be perfect. So for the dill dressing for the scallop, I've got some lovely fresh dill, white wine vinegar, sugar, some vegetable oil and a little bit of salt. I've got some water ready to boil already. And firstly, I'm just going to take the ends of the stalks off. You don't have to worry about taking it and picking it all the way down. Those we don't need. And then just cut. Just so it's a little bit easier and less stressful on the blender. As soon as water's ready, it's going to go straight into boiling water for about 10 to 15 seconds just to break it down, but keep it bright green. Then we're going to blend it with all these simple ingredients. So water's come up to a rapid boil. There's no need to salt this. We're going to salt it later on, so we get the seasoning just right. So all of your dill. So you see this is a nice large pan, so the boiling hasn't stopped. Really important, you're not putting it into a shallow pan and then it cools down. It's going to cook it much quicker, keep it much fresher, and that nice vibrant green colour. It's about 10 to 15 seconds. Just a little stir. So turn the heat off so it's a bit safer. Then use a sieve. You can drain it if you like, or you can just scoop it out like this. And we're going to go straight into the blender jug. And then take it over to blend. So this is a sweet and sour dill dressing. So the sourness from the white wine vinegar, sweetness from the sugar, and then just to give it a nicer mouthfeel, we've got the oil. So the oil is pretty much equal quantity to the vinegar. So we're going to add the white wine vinegar and the sugar. A little bit of salt now. You can add more later if it needs it, but we'll get it ground into it. and then a splash of the oil. Again, veg oil, sunflower oil, as long as it's bland. You don't want to use an olive oil or a ground nut oil that is really flavoursome. We want to taste the dill in this. So make sure it's very tightly fitting and blend it until it's smooth. So you can see it's lovely and green. There's no flecks of dill in there. You pass it through a sieve if you want to, but you don't need to with this. As long as you've got a good blender, you get a lovely pure green dressing. Just have a taste. It's a little bit more salt. If you think it needs a little bit more vinegar or sugar, for your personal taste, feel free to add it. So this should taste ever so slightly sour, followed by the sweetness. Should be a lovely balance, as you would any sweet and sour dish. So then decant this into a bowl, and we're going to keep it in the fridge, or you can put it straight on a bowl of ice, just to keep it nice and green and fresh. So this is starting to get a lovely colour now. It's nearly ready to blend, but this is the stage we add the curry powder. So it's been in about 15-20 minutes so far. I'm going to add the curry powder. If you add it too early, then you're not going to be able to tell how caramelised it is, because the turmeric will make it yellow and it'll look like it's coloured before it is. So we're going to add the curry powder now. I just cook that out for a minute or two just to make sure we haven't got the raw spice in there. Scraping all this flavour off the bottom of the pan. So I've turned the heat up a little bit, so it's like back to how it was at the start on like a moderate fry. We've cooked most of the moisture out, so it's not going to blend on its own, so you need to add some liquid to it now. So just a splash of water. So as well as adding moisture, that's going to deglaze all that flavour off the bottom of the pan. So deglazing means bringing all that flavour off the bottom of the pan, as you would a roasted joint. It's the same with this. So bring it up to the boil, and now this is going to be ready to blend. So now we're ready to blend. Just need to remove the lemongrass because that's not going to blend down. We've got all the flavour out of it that we need. Just take a bit of time just to scrape off any excess cauliflower. And then straight into your blender. Make sure we get it all, scrape off any excess from the pan, but it should look nice and clean, the pan, from that water where we've brought everything off. Now I know from experience this is going to need a little bit more salt. We did add some earlier, but as chefs we tend to talk about layers of seasoning, so you season throughout the process, not just at the end. Again, make sure the lid is on super tight because it is quite hot. You don't want it bursting out. And blend until smooth. So if it needs a little bit more liquid, just add it as you go. Try not to add it all at the start, you don't want it too wet. But if it's not moving around in the blender, that's how you know. It just needs a little bit more to get it really silky. So you can see it's nice and silky now. Just going to check it for flavour. Lovely and smooth. Just got a little bit of salt. Now this comes down to personal preference. however you like it. I don't use a lot of black pepper in the restaurant, but something like this it's perfect for. You can stir it in, but I find it easier just to blend it and make sure it's really well incorporated. Careful when you're opening it up as it is hot. Don't want it to explode, so just take your time. And there you go. You can pass it through a sieve if you like. It's something, you know, chefs tend to do, but this is going to be lovely and silky. You're not going to get any lumps from it, so you can decant it straight into a container. So from that half a cauliflower, you can see there's still a good yield of portions here. Something you can do in advance, even if you wanted to do it the day before, cling film it over, then when you come to do your dinner, just reheat it as we're going to do later. So you don't want this to get a skin and dry out, so cover it over and then very gently just push the cling film down, bring it in from the sides, push it down. That contact is going to stop it getting a dry skin, because if you get a skin, when you stir that in, when you're reheating it, you're just going to get lumps. So that'll keep nicely in the fridge now until we need it. So that's the prep done, let's get on with the starter. So get the oven preheated, 170 degrees, that's going to be perfect for the lamb and the potatoes. So scallops is a really simple process, but it's important you get the best produce possible. Now when I'm using fish, if I can't eat it raw, or it's not good enough for raw, it's not good enough to use at all. Banquist use the fresh fish shop, master fishmongers, and they get the best Orkney dive scallops, which are perfect for this. And if they're that good to eat raw, then they're the best you can have. So these scallops come with the roe on, and then a little bit of muscle, that's where it's attached to the shell. So we're not going to use this today. Just take your time, moving your thumb all the way around. This muscle will come off in one. And just make sure you've got this lovely whole scallop. Same again, using your thumb to slide around. This is the most important thing to take off because it's really tough, whether you're roasting it or serving it raw like we are today. So this is probably my favourite way to serve scallops. Now it's not cooked per se, they are cured, so the acidity and the salt that we're going to add later, that's just going to slightly cook the scallops, kill some of the bacteria and just make sure it's still safe and edible to eat. So these are lovely large scallops. We're just going to cut them into 3 slices each, because I like them quite thick. Even though this is like a ceviche, they're still really tender and beautifully sweet, so they don't have to be wafer thin, so they're going to be easier to work with as well. So we're going to lay them nice and evenly onto a plate. Again, make sure they're nice and even, that way they're going to cure evenly. We've not got any on top of the others that are stopping any more curing. So lemon, we're going to add some rind. Again, box grater is okay for this, but it really is worth investing in a microplane. They're a brilliant tool. Always straight over it. So what we're doing, we're not just getting that lemon zest on there. All that essential oil, which you can't really see, is spraying onto that scallop and adding more flavour. So then add some lemon juice, So the acidity from that is not only going to add flavour, it's going to start to cure the scallop. So just taking your time to make sure all of the scallops get a good amount of lemon juice. So I've used about a third of the lemon for this, which for me is more than enough. We are going to add salt, but we're going to do that later. We're going to add sea salt just before we serve it, so you still get that lovely crunch. So let these sit in the fridge 20 to 25 minutes. If it goes over that, it's okay, as long as you're not leaving it, well past an hour. So like when we were blanching the dill, we're going to blanch the samphire now. Again, really important we use a big pan. It's called big pot blanching. So straight in, it comes straight back up to the boil, so it's not stewing. It's going to cook nice and quickly and stay nice and crisp. It's going to take about 30 seconds, strain it off, and then it's ready to eat. So you don't need to add salt to this water as well. Samphire is naturally salty, and we'll season the dish as we bring it together later. So turn the heat off, then drain onto a little dish. It's going to be served at room temperature, so we're just going to let this cool down naturally. Don't need to ice it because it's such a small amount. It's going to cool down quite quickly and it's going to be ready to eat. So the starter's pretty much ready to go now. Scallops are cured, like beautiful, juicy, just need seasoning. Limes we just need to prepare, which won't take a minute. Samphire's blanched, and the dill dressing is ready to sauce. So first thing I'm going to do, season the scallops. Now really important, you don't use a table salt here. Sea salt is perfect. So nice and high, sort of about a foot away. If you do it too close, what happens? You get too much salt. If you do it higher up, it spreads out nice and evenly. So do this at the end so you get a nice crunch of the salt. And it's a lovely mouthfeel. So sea salt breaks down slowly on the tongue, so it feels more delicate than like table salt, which hits the palate and tastes really salty. So the scallops, I'm going to plate up first. Just take your time. This is a cold dish. You can really take your time here to make it look beautiful. And then make a nice ring. So all the dressing is going to sit in the middle, so it doesn't flood everywhere. Okay, so now it's ready. We're going to prepare the finger limes. So you see you got these beautiful pearls from the segments. They're a really lovely hit of limey flavour. So just take your time, don't squish them. I'm going to use a spoon just to pull them out. You see them almost look like little eggs of caviar. So just dot them around. Get that lovely burst of acidity. Make sure you hit every scallop. So whilst this looks pretty, it's also important to do this so you get balance whilst you're eating it. If you put a big clump of these on the side, then the diner might just eat a whole mouthful of it and it's going to overpower. So this way you're encouraging them to eat one or half a scallop at a time, getting a lovely bit of every ingredient. So next thing to add is the samphire. So we don't need to season this. There's a lot of seasoning throughout the dressing and on the scallops. It's salty anyway. We don't need to dress it either. We've got a lot of dressing with the dill. It's going to add a lovely little crunch to the dish. Extra layer of flavour. So all that's left to go on is the dressing. So this can happily sit for a couple of minutes if you're doing something else or making sure your guests are happy, serving any wine. Dressing can go on just before you serve it. So give it a stir, bring it together, because some of the solids will sit at the bottom. And we just want to make sure it's nicely mixed. And just take your time, on the top of the spoon, just pour it in the middle. So you're creating a little pool with beautiful dill dressing. So there you have it, the beautiful cured hand-dyed Orkney scallops with the fresh blanched samphire and then that lovely sweet and sour, really fresh, vibrant dill dressing. So before the starter, we preheated the oven to 170 degrees. Now's the time to cook the potatoes. They can take about 20 to 25 minutes, straight in, and we're going to check them halfway through and give them a stir. Hope you enjoyed that starter. Now it's time to get the main course ready. It's a really classic thing to do when cooking meats, especially lamb like this, is use these aromats. It tends to always be butter, garlic, thyme, or sometimes rosemary. It's just a really good way of penetrating more flavour into the fat of the lamb and on the outside. It doesn't go through it, but it really coats it. It's something that just adds a little bit more depth without taking anything away from the lamb. The pan's hot, a little bit of oil first. You always want to start with oil, not with butter. The butter can burn. Salt on the outside of the lamb, both sides. Then straight into hot pan. You should hear it sizzling straight away. Again, moderate fry, not too harsh, because you're going to scorch the lamb and it's just going to taste burnt. You want to fry it gently, slowly, so what you're doing is building up a lovely colour and also rendering the fat. If you do it too fast and then in the oven, the fat's going to be crispy on the outside but still too under rendered and a little bit flabby. So use the bones to lift up. Starting to build up a little bit of colour, but it's not quite enough yet. Sometimes it has a tendency to lift in the middle. Use some tongs or a spoon if you don't want to put your hands in. You want to push the middle down. Make sure you've got full contact with the bottom of the pan. Get a lovely even colorization on the fat. You want to feel it popping underneath your hand. So that's a nice colour. What we're going to do, turn that down a little bit. Now is where we can add the butter and then start to add the aromats. The butter's going to start to foam. Garlic's still in its skin. Just crush. Add that straight to the pan. That's going to start to permeate flavour straight away. Then the thyme in there as well. Just stand back. Thyme has a tendency to pop, so the water bursting out of it, it can spit hot fat at you. So you should smell those amazing garlic and thyme aromas in the butter. And it's just a lovely golden colour. And then basting. So this is just adding all that flavour to the outside of the meat. Stops the outside drying out. Now, some chefs might tell you that it adds flavour or keeps the meat moist. It doesn't do that. It just helps add in this flavour and it stops the outside drying out. So you can see you've got a lovely golden colour here still. It's not scorching. This is where you can, if you want to, turn it down a little bit more. Check the fat, it's beautiful and golden. Leave a little bit on the bottom. I'm going to keep this as much as possible on the fat. When we cook it in the oven as well, it's going to stay direct contact with the fat on the pan. If you put this part on the bottom, all you're going to do is scorch and dry out that meat, and it's not going to cook very evenly. So the key is keeping it on that skin as long as possible. If you're not sure on how it should feel or how it should look, if you've got a little electric probe, take it to 48 to 50 in the center, and then we're going to rest it, and it'll just continue, and it'll be beautifully pink. So just at the 10-15 minute stage, just want to check the potatoes, give them a little stir, make sure they're not sticking. It's better to find out if they're sticking now than later on. And it's just going to help them crisp up. They already smell amazing. So they're nearly tender, they're about halfway through. We just want them to crisp up a little bit more. So these will have another 10 to 15 minutes. I absolutely love wine. At my restaurant, in the chef's table where we cook in front of the guests, sometimes I'll get involved and pour the wines and talk about them with the guests and have a glass with them as well. So for this dish, we've chosen the Moulin de Chêne. Now this is a wine from the south of France, Rhône Valley, great for lamb. So lovely crimson colour to it. It's got a really nice velvety finish, so it's smooth and not too high in tannins. And the fruity flavours are coming through with red currant, strawberries and blackberries. They're just going to finish that lamb off perfectly. That's going to be brilliant to cut through the fat on that lamb. So time to check the lamb. At the thickest part, if it feels a bit bouncy still, it's not quite ready. Again, the best thing to use for this is a little electric probe if you've got one. I know from years of experience as a chef how it should feel, and I know that needs another few minutes. So purple sprout and broccoli is really easy to prepare. All we want to do is remove probably ones like this about just over half of the stalk because it is a little bit woody. So keep all those lovely leaves on, these tiny little florets as well. And you can keep these bits, there's no point wasting them. So those leaves wilt down nicely. And the buds do lose their colour, they go green. Really versatile vegetable when it's in season. Lovely with meat dishes like this, really tasty. And just so simple to cook. Great alternative to normal broccoli. So this is prepared and ready to go. It's just going to need blanching for a couple of minutes later on when we're ready to serve. So this lamb feels nearly ready now. There is a slightly thinner side which is going to cook more than the thicker side. So it's best to feel this bit. Because really raw, rare lamb isn't that pleasant. I prefer it medium personally. So this lamb feels ready now, slightly firm, it's just nice and pink. So as important as it was earlier to temper the meat, now we've got to rest it. So flip it over, see how beautifully caramelised that is. And we're just going to let that sit for 5 minutes to rest. So the lamb's rested, the broccoli's ready to go and the water's nearly hot and the potatoes are nearly cooked, so we can start heating up the puree. So you can see there's no skin, it's lovely and silky. Into a pan. Very, very gentle, because this is pureed down, it will catch very easy and it will skin very easy. So nice gentle heat, lots of stir in, and it's going to be beautiful. So potatoes are ready, lovely and crispy, just soft in the middle. All that tomato puree is caramelised with those spices. You see that lovely oil that's coming out there, it's got all that flavour in. So you can let these sit for a minute while we bring the rest of the ingredients together. So water's boiling now. We can add the broccoli straight to it. Don't need to salt this, I'm going to season it afterwards. So puree is just warming up nicely. You don't want it too hot, you don't want it bubbling away. So the broccoli's been in about a minute. Just want to check with a small knife, because obviously it is very hot. Just that the stalk is just starting to go tender. You still want a little bit of crunch to it. Another 30 seconds, that'd be perfect. Yeah, just a little bit of like potato dry in the back of my throat. When you start talking and you know it's coming.
Yeah. Do you want a glass of water on there?
Turn the heat down on the broccoli. That's had like 2 minutes now. And just drain straight into a dish. So it should still look vibrant and green, really fresh. The leaves not completely wilted, they're standing up just. Tiny splash of olive oil. Then a little pinch of sea salt. And then just stir it up. So dress it nicely. And that's ready to go. Now if it's ready, time to plate up. Very simple to plate. So we're going to go with a nice scoop of the cauliflower puree. If you've got some left, you could always put it in a bowl in the middle of the table if you like. But I wouldn't put too much on the plate. Then the potatoes. Now you can drain these if you like. I love the oils and everything, that adds almost dressing to the plate, because there's no sauce with this. There's a lot of moisture and flavour within the dish. So we're using all of the natural elements that come together with it. So a good portion of the potatoes. And then for the lamb. So this lamb's been beautifully rested. For me, perfectly cooked, just nice and pink. So about 3 bones each. So down this end, you find it's a little bit thinner, but the bones are a bit more spread. So the wider bones, I'll come to the edge of this one. Make sure you're going straight down and you're against this bone, so you can get a nice even portion. Let your knife do the work. Straight through. And so you've got a lovely pinkness to the meat. Now to be chefy, you can slice the end off, but that's just waste for me. I think you should just sit this on. And let it sit over the potatoes. Then the last element is that beautifully cooked, nicely dressed sprouting broccoli. And there we go, roasted rack of lamb, caramelised cauliflower puree, Bombay style potatoes, and some lovely sprouting broccoli. Now you've finished the main course, it's time for the star of the show, the dessert. Now to plate up the dessert. Some of these items are ready for you, but there's just a little bit of work to do. So you've got some lovely clotted cream, the crust's on there as well. It's important to keep that. That tastes really good and it's got a lovely texture. Some vanilla. So very carefully with a small sharp knife, use the tip from the top. Ease it all the way down, watching your fingers. Just one side, so you open it up and it's not split open. and use the knife, very gently go all the way down. Make sure there's no bits of the actual pod in there and it's just seeds. You should be able to smell this straight away. Straight into that clotted cream. Clotted cream's so good, you don't need to do a lot to it, but add in just a bit of really good quality vanilla like this, it's just going to enhance it a bit. So mix it in until the seeds are evenly distributed. So that's ready now, and that's going to be the perfect bit of an indulgence for the chocolate Marquise. So the Marquise, if you've not had one before, it's like a mousse but it's slightly firmer. So it's melted chocolate, butter, and then egg yolks whipped until they're nice and light and fluffy with some whipped cream and all folded together. So it's got me a bit more substance than your normal chocolate mousse. So that goes straight into the bowl. Then we're going to take a nice decadent portion. Now I like to be quite rustic with this. Just sit that straight on top. Even though it's not like perfectly formed, it still looks quite impressive. So using it all up, bring it together. So the idea of this as well is when you take your spoon and eat through it, you're going to get a bit of the Marquise and a bit of the cream as well. And the last element, which is going to give some texture, is this chocolate soil. So this is cocoa powder, flour, almonds, a little bit of malt and some butter, just cooked until it's like a shortbread and really crumbly. So just sit that on top, let it cascade down a bit. Because the clotted cream in the Marquise is so soft and creamy, just gives you a little bit of bite and a little something else. And that's the last dish, chocolate Marquise with vanilla clotted cream and that beautiful crispy crunchy chocolate soil on top. I hope you've enjoyed everything. Thank you for cooking along with me. I hope you've picked up some great skills that you can carry on and have a great evening. So it has to be salt and vinegar, but the best one is Walker's Max salt and vinegar, the crinkle cut. So my death row meal is just a smorgasbord of charcuterie, pickles, olives, pork pie, just something that's going to take me a long time to eat before I get executed. So if I had a dinner party, I'd invite Marco Pierre White because he's a legend, Nico, who's one of my favourite chefs, so Nico Ladinis, and then just to mix things up, Katie Hopkins. My favourite restaurant in the world is the French Laundry. I love their philosophy, I love their food, I love everything about it, it's my mecca. My worst kitchen injury, I was prepping some carrots when I was at college with a small knife and I put the knife all the way through my hand in between and it come out the other side. I had to have it glued together at hospital.